So the categories that I break down Fursuiting 101 in, because I've run this at other conventions, the two categories I break this down in are performing in your fursuit and maintaining your fursuit. Two very important aspects of fursuiting is number one, again, performing when you're actually out in the fursuit, and number two is maintaining, which means, you know, after and before you go into fursuit. Because fursuits are very expensive investments. We don't want to make sure, you know, it's not like a blanket we can just toss around. Some people may act like it is, but if we really do care about the investment and, you know, the value that we have in our fursuits, then there are ways to properly handle fursuits. So we'll start with performing in fursuits first of all, just because, you know, some of you are in fursuits right now, and you may have questions about actually what to do when you're in fursuit at a con or outside of the con. So, first off, when you're performing in fursuit, you want to make sure that you have good prep before you even put on the fursuit. Good prep meaning that you have an underskin for your fursuit. This is something that's very, very handy. It's not necessary, but an underskin such as a dive skin, one of those underskins that you wear to keep either warm or keep the moisture off you, and Under Armour, that kind of material, lycra material for your body, hands, at least the torso and the feet, or not feet, the torso and your legs. That's very, very useful when you fursuit because it helps keep the sweat away from your suit, so your suit stays nice and dry, not damp and disgusting when someone comes to hug you. And it also helps you tolerate the heat as well, because when a lot of the lycra suits and dive skins that you wear, they're actually designed to keep wind flowing like into your skin without making you, you know, either too cold or making you hot and sticky. So those are really good investments to have if you are a fursuiter or planning to fursuit. So also before you fursuit, when you go out, showering is highly recommended. Even if you had a shower, you know, in the morning or whatnot, to have a shower before you fursuit is basically guaranteeing that you're fresh and that your fursuit stays fresh as well. I mean, it's pretty much common sense. We all know that, you know, smelling at least appropriate is, you know, basically good hygiene, and it's good courtesy at a convention, especially when we're around so many people. We really want to make sure that we're presentable in our fursuits. So deodorant right after your shower is also a really good investment as well, and right before your fursuit, just because, same thing again, hygiene is always important when you're fursuiting as well, because you want to keep your fursuit good and fresh so that you can wear it longer, so you can be out in it longer, and so that overall as a fursuit performer, you're a lot more entertaining, and you can basically cater to your audience a little better. Also, before you're performing in suit, hydration is key. This is like the golden rule. Basically, you want to make sure that you have a good cup of water. Hydration does not mean make your favorite martini, you know, make yourself a, you know, a sex on the beach. This is not hydration. This is after you fursuit, when you just want to relax. But before you fursuit, cup of water, even energy drinks that have electrolytes in them, either of those would work as long as they keep you nice and quenched, so that when you're in fursuit you don't dehydrate. Very, very important. And also eat as well. Eating is just as important as hydration, because you don't want to go to fursuit on an empty stomach. It's a lot of work, it'll take a lot of energy out. Yeah, exactly. So, for example, if you're Raz here, you just find a paper off the ground and you eat it. And as long as it sustains you, you know, it's a good habit to get into before you fursuit. Obviously, this doesn't mean stuff your face full of, you know, Cheetos and Doritos before you go to fursuit. But as long as you have something that can sustain you, high carb foods, you know, something that provides long-lasting energy, so when you're in fursuit, you're able to go out and about for longer periods of time. So also a few final notes about before you even get into fursuit for pre-fursuiting prep. If you're at a convention, very important to make sure you have everything you need. So that means you have your badge, for example. Raz, do you have your badge? He has it right there on his left lapel. And do you have a room key on you badge to get back to your hotel room? He has it in his right pocket. So these are a few things that a lot of fursuiters tend to forget. Even the most experienced fursuiters forget them at times. But always have what you need, or what you will need at a convention. So that'd be your con badge, your room key. Some people have a cell phone, some people have a flashlight. I don't know why you have a flashlight, but it's okay, that's Raz's special. So, yes, question.
Identification?
Identification is also important.
Insurance card.
Those are also important to carry, and that's actually right what I have noted down for when you're going into any sort of public place, whether you're at a park, whether you're at a public function that's not a furry con. It's always good to have something that you can identify yourself with just in case anything happens. So make sure overall you are carrying what you need before you go out into a public space, just so that you're prepared. So, for first-time fursuiters now we're actually getting into performing. If you're just getting used to your fursuit, one of the things that you'll notice is your physical prowess is limited. In other words, you might not be able to see as well, you might not be able to move as well, you might not be able to hear as well. So these are things that you really have to look out for when you're in a fursuit for the first time. So we'll talk about seeing out of a fursuit first. Most people, that walk around a convention, any given person, they've got good peripheral vision to the sides. They can, very easily look up, down, left, right without having to move their heads. With fursuits, it's not the same case. In fursuits, it's very easy to imagine what a fursuiter is looking at. All you need to do is take your hands, put them into a hole like this, and put them in your eyes. So now your peripherals are cut off. You can't really see up, down, left, or right without moving your head. This is essentially what the vision is like in a fursuit head. So with that in mind, you want to make sure that for first-time fursuiters, when you put on your head, the first thing you want to do is get used to how you look out of your head. Some people have fursuit vision out of their eyes, such as Raz, and I see pretty much everyone in this room has vision out of either their eyes or their tear ducts. And some people have vision out of their mouth. So whatever it is, you want to make sure that you're used to seeing out of your suit, because your eyesight is the most important thing that you have in fursuit. Also, airways as well. When you put on a fursuit head, you'll, for the first time, many people will think that they're suffocating. Don't worry, it's totally regular. But in the fursuit head, especially those that are made of resin versus foam, you'll find that it becomes a little bit tougher to breathe just because your face is now blocked by all this fur and foam and resin and whatever else you have in your head. So you also want to make sure that you get a little bit of time to get used to breathing in the head. So either just tossing on the head and wearing it around for, wear it around the house for an hour or something like that, get used to how it breathes, how it moves, and get the general feeling of it. Another important thing that comes with the lack of vision is also a lack of spatial depth, because as humans, we use our eyes to also perceive depth. But when we take away so much vision, when we put on a fursuit head, things might appear, it's like the little message you see on car windows. Things may appear closer than they seem. So when you also put on a fursuit head and you're performing in a fursuit, for first timers, you definitely want to make sure you know your depth. Basically, your depth perception will change. You want to make sure that you test out where things are, what you can see, how far things are from your head, and all these kind of things. Basically as a precaution so you don't smack someone in the face unless you're trying to. Like Raz, right? Point taken, exactly. Another very important thing about, alright, thank you Raz. Another very important thing is energy levels. So some people here like Raz, he's a very bouncy husky and all that kind of stuff. He runs around, he does handstands, he picks people up for no reason. But some other people might not be as physically able. So you want to make sure that, again, when you are putting on a fursuit, you're performing in your fursuit for the first time, or even if you're just getting used to fursuiting, you want to make sure that you know exactly how long you can go out. You don't have to narrow down to 2 minutes, 37 seconds, or 2 minutes, or 2 hours, 37 minutes, and however many seconds, but you should be able to know your limits and play within it. It's a pretty overused quote as a general term, but it applies to fursuiting especially because the last thing we want to see, especially at a convention when everyone's having fun, is someone passed out on the ground, or you stumbling towards your room and you rip off your head and you're like, it takes away from the fun aspect there. So when you're performing in a fursuit, you want to make sure that you know how you feel at all times, and take plenty of breaks if you need. Even if you feel like you might not need water right now, or you might not need to sit down, because Raz never sits down, but sometimes he does sit down to kind of take a break. It's always better to take breaks and be safe rather to go all out crazy and burn out the first day of the convention, and then you can't enjoy yourself the rest of the convention. So that's basically when you're putting on your fursuit and beginning to perform. Now, what happens when we actually perform in a fursuit, when we start interacting with the public and the crowds? Everyone has a different way of doing it, but there are a few guidelines to keep in mind just so that not only you are safe when you are out and about, but that other people around you are safe as well when you're interacting with each other, and everyone can have a good time. So the first thing that you want to consider when you're performing in your fursuit is know your audience. Are you dealing with furry crowds? Are you dealing with other convention crowds? Are you dealing with families? Are you dealing with children? Are you dealing with people that have no idea what furry is? Are you dealing with mom and dad? Regardless who your audience is, you always want to consider, all right, I'm at a furry convention, I'm at Indie FurCon. My audience are people that are like me, they like fursuits, hopefully, and they're very open to hugs and seeing us around. So basically, you want to make sure that if you're at, say, a sci-fi convention where fursuits are not necessarily a big hit or common there, you want to make sure you're not just instantly running up to someone and bombarding them with hugs or picking them up like Raz does. He doesn't give hugs, he picks people up. That's his way of giving you a hug. So you want to make sure that you know who you're interacting with just so you don't accidentally bum rush a person with hugs and somehow do something wrong and they have a bad time and therefore you have a bad time. So you also want to know your environment, following with knowing your audience. So know your environment as well. Are you in a hotel? Are you in a public space? Are you in a convention center? And this is actually really important because it determines where... Who has a cell phone off? Raz, go get that person. Who has a cell phone?
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Raz, go pick that person up. Okay. No, okay. All right. There we go. Oh, there we go. Oh, Raz, oh gosh, Raz, what are you doing? Raz, friendly but not too friendly. All right, there we go. So again, knowing your environment, when you're at a hotel, the convention space, for example, here, we're in a much, much safer environment because again, this is the furry community. We all know about fursuits. The environment here is a lot more lax and fursuits are more welcome. But if you're in a public area such as a park, if you're at a shopping mall, if you're at any non-furry or non-furry supportive area, you want to make sure that you know where everything is for any situation. You want to make sure you know where the restrooms are. You want to make sure you have a place to change or a place to take a break, and you want to make sure that you always have a way back home. So, here in a hotel, it's very easy. All you do is you walk to your elevators and, you go back up to your room and that's it. Or you walk across the street to the La Quinta and go to your room. But it's not like that in all situations. So you want to make sure that you know exactly where you are so you can prepare accordingly. A good idea to have when you're performing in fursuit, not only does it add to your character, but it can also be really helpful communicating, is to have some certain hand gestures. So you don't need to be really animated, you don't need to wave your hands all about, but it's good to have a few things in mind that people can understand easily. For example, Raz right there, he opens his arm out wide. This is the fursuiter's way of asking whether you'd like to hug or not. And they'll usually stand there, they won't usually just bombard you right away with hugs because we have a little bit more kind of respect for that, especially if we're doing it to someone we've never met before. So you want to make sure that you have some simple hand gestures like that. Some very useful signals, for example, are if you're doing this with your hands, that means a fursuiter is very hot, you are very hot. I mean, not that way, don't think too hard, but you're very heated. Yes, you're heated and you need a break. Or some people prefer to do something like this. I don't prefer this. This means like I'm about to die, call 911. So that right there is pretty much a no. But this, for example, many fursuiters use whenever they're in need of a break, and that basically says to the other person, look, just give me a moment, I need to have a break. And then maybe just another one would be something like that as well, which is I need water, for example. They'll do a kind of a drinking motion, they'll point to their mouth. That usually indicates they need to intake something, whether they need to take a break and just breathe regularly or they need some water. Basically, overall, you just want to have a few hand gestures that are easily understandable so everyone knows exactly how you're performing and communicating. Alright, so another very important aspect of performing in fursuit is speaking. So a lot of people choose to speak in their fursuits, they even add voice to their fursuits. Raz, what do you sound like when you're in fursuit? Exactly, so Raz, he has his own little character that he builds into his performance as well as a voice. And it's important to realize whether or not you want to do that. Some people, they like adding voices into their characters, and it's part of being fun, it's part of performing in fursuit. Some people, however, they prefer not to speak because they don't have a voice developed, or their character is more of a mystical, serene, zen, monk type of character that doesn't like to speak. So just remember when you're performing in fursuit, feel out your character, imagine what people would see you as. So if I look at Raz and I don't know what he is, I'd imagine he's like a cute, fluffy dog that's wearing a canine vest, probably wants to shoot me. But he's going to come up to me and he's going to start like yipping at me. So now I know that, especially from his voice and his character, this is a friendly dog. He's not a mean dog that's going to bite me. He's not going to put handcuffs on me unless I like that, but whatever. I'm being terrible today, aren't I? Yeah, just a little bit, just a little bit, just a tip. So, anyways, but for example, some fursuiters, they may have the more, again, composed, regal type of look to them, and they might not speak right away. So you just want to remember when you're in fursuit, you want to basically act the way that you want people to see you. If you're mystical, you're serene, be mystical and serene. Maybe a slow walk, more hand gestures than talking. If you want to be a bouncy, hyperactive canine like Raz is, be a bouncy, hyperactive canine. Just don't swing that tail like pets, because you'll probably knock someone out with that tail. That's probably happened. Or you'll pick them up. Either way. So. I don't know why I have this in my notes. It says make sure you add Shaniqua at the end of your sentences. Did you put that in? You probably put that. Yeah, you put that in. He said so. Make sure you add Shaniqua at the end of your sentences as well when you're in fursuit, just because apparently Shaniqua is an important thing to say. There we go. All right. So. This goes back as well, a bit of a final tip for performing in your suit and interacting with audiences. Handstands. Handstands are very important. Make sure you know how to do a handstand. There we go. All right, now, active fursuiting. So, there we go, handstand. Yay, very nice. Oh, he's doing push-ups too. Okay, that's... It's not even after dark yet, man. You're not supposed to stir me up. Anyways, let's go. Active fursuiting versus passive fursuiting. When again, this goes back to the whole point about knowing how long you can perform in fursuit. So again, some people like Raz Husky here, he's very hyper, he's very bubbly, he wants to run around and give you hugs and pick you up. But some people, their characters might not be like that. Their suits, for example, if you have a quad suit that's a realistic wolf and you're being very regal, you're being majestic, you want to make sure that that also shows in your character. You're not running around trying to lick people's faces, you're kind of showing the character with a slow, emphasized walk. You're being very formal, and you have that kind of attitude. If you're a Raz Husky, you just go up to people and you pick them up. So that's his character, and that's pretty much, that's how he wants to play it out. So just another thing to keep in mind. All right. There is a section, however, that I feel is pretty pertinent to IFC in particular, but this applies to any fursuiter because fursuiters are also mascots as well. It's pretty much one and the same term, and that means that when kids are around, you're going to get stormed by kids. It's an inevitable fact, and you'll have to interact with kids a little bit more differently than you would, say, a convention attendee. Even if the kid is a convention attendee, there's a few more guidelines that, especially with children, in a fursuit you want to keep in mind. The first thing that you don't want to do, never do with children, is pick them up. First thing you want to do. So even Raz over here, even I have to tell him, you cannot pick up children. And this is basically a given rule. Even approaching the child is a little bit iffy. You want to let the child approach you just so that they can kind of get the feeling of, approaching a big fuzzy stuffed animal. Because children are small, and most of us as fursuiters, we're pretty big and intimidating to them. So we want to make sure that we give them the room to breathe as well as the room to react to themselves. And you see, as Raz Husky is doing here, this is a very, very good example of what you would do for a fursuiter, is you get down low to their level so you're not as big and frightening, and you kind of make small movements. You don't want to flail your arms in their faces and scare them off. Yeah, exactly. You don't want to do that because that'll make them feel a little bit more intimidated. But basically, hold a pose, for example, or hold a paw out and just let them do all the reacting. Because they're the ones, at the end of the day, that we want to try to gently integrate into, interacting with the fursuit. So let them set the pace and not the fursuit. So, Also, a small note on the topic of children as well, especially when you're around a lot of children. Make sure you know where all the children are, because many a time I've done this before. I'll swing myself around to talk to kids, and I end up knocking one out with my tail. So you want to make sure that when you're being crowded by children, or if you're at an event with a lot of small bodies, you want to make sure that you know where everything is. Very much. And this also goes back to having a handler as well. So if you have a handler while you're with children, then the handler can also kind of say to the kid, you know, oh, do you want a hug? Do you want a high five? Or even peel them off from you with words, not actually like peel them off of you, because that's also a no-no. But having a handler when you're with children, especially outside of furry conventions, is a really good idea. So, dangerous things you shouldn't play with. I had the funniest PowerPoint slide for this certain section, but we have live examples instead, which is like, wow, it even has the comics. I'm going to put that away. I'm going to get in trouble for that. Anyways, dangerous things you shouldn't play with. Number one is Raz's gun. Does this fire? Oh, it does. Okay, well it doesn't yet, but you got to load it up. That's okay. Put that away before you hurt someone. Jeez, man. Okay, so dangerous things you shouldn't play with is, first of all, a lot of fursuiters get sandwiched by elevator doors and escalators, especially while we're at conventions. Thankfully, this one doesn't have an escalator, but you got to be careful of being around those particular devices. Escalators, elevators, any sort of moving thing, basically. Fursuiters can very easily trip. They can stumble, they can fall. We don't want any of these happening. And same thing with staircases as well. If you're a fursuiter and you don't want to, and you have no choice but to use a staircase, for example, if you're at Anthrocon. If you're at Anthrocon, you'd get that joke. Who's been to Anthrocon before? FWA is the same one. So Anthrocon and FWA, basically these two conventions are infamous for having very long elevator lines, so some fursuiters choose to go for the stairs. If you're doing the stairs as a fursuiter, you want to make sure, again, you know how big your paws are so you can walk up the stairs accordingly, and don't try yourself out of the stairs. You put this in my notes. Don't hang out with Shaniqua. Thanks, Raz. I mean, jeez. Is there anything else? Don't hang out in Oklahoma. What's wrong with Oklahoma?
It smells.
Wow, okay. Raz, you're making me look bad here. All right. Don't hang out by yourself. That is definitely not a thing. This is pretty much it's based on the situation, whether or not you'd like to have a handler or not when you're out and about in fursuit. Some performers, such as Raz and even Fu Manchu back there, some performers are more than capable of being out and about by themselves in public environments. They've had experience, for example, as mascots. They basically know how to deal with the public and every type of audience. But if you're unsure about it, whether you're in a new environment, whether you're at a convention for the first time, it's good to have a handler or at least a friend come along with you so that they can be your second pair of eyes and ears. So just another tip and guideline for first-time performers. And, whoa. Okay, this was definitely not you that put this in. I'm not going to read this because this is not past 8 p.m. yet, so all the kids are still awake. Handlers. So now for handlers, because handlers are just as important as fursuit performers are, especially if you're handling for the first time. You want to make sure that the fursuiter that you're handling for is okay from time to time. So that basically means you poke Raz, and if I'm handling for Raz, I'll poke him, I'll say, hey, you doing all right? And he'll arf at me. That's an okay. That's a clear sign that he's doing all right. He wants to keep going. But if Raz is tired and I kind of poke at him, and he's, are you doing all right? And he does, he does this, and that means he's got to go. We're gonna go take a break. And if there's anyone that's interacting with him, for example, you'd be the person that says, okay, thanks, but my buddy here, my friend here, he needs to go take a break. We'll be back soon. So basically, as a handler, you have to be that second voice as well, a second pair of eyes and ears for your fursuiter as well. With that being said, you got to be alert for also the area and the surroundings that you're in. When you're in a public place, a mall is not the same as a hotel. A mall, you have to make sure you're watching out for example, children that just randomly run up to you. It's happened many times to me, so I know that it happens on a frequent basis. For example, actually no, not for example, I just said the mall thing, but as a handler, you also should be able to talk on behalf of the fursuiter when you're in a public place. So, say again you're in a mall. Many malls, of which I know of, they don't allow private mascots. They don't allow people with masks to walk in. This is due to not only security issues, but also because some malls hire professional mascots. They don't want just someone barging in and stealing the spotlight, for example. So when you're in a public place with the fursuiter is performing, as a handler, you should be able to speak on behalf of the fursuiter, who you are, why you're there, you know, perhaps what you're representing or anything like that. But basically, be prepared to speak as the fursuiter and for yourself as well. Handlers should also be carrying the essentials for both people, the fursuiter and themselves. The essentials meaning water for the fursuiter, not a toy gun. I'm not sure why he still has a flashlight. This is more like a nightstick, isn't it? No? Okay. Well, cell phone is a definite for handlers, just in case you need to contact anyone. Any sort of information, such as credentials, money, and you know, a hotel room key or a car key, something that you need in order to, you know, basically ensure that you have a safe passage back to wherever you need to go. And bodyguard. Make sure handler knows how to fight like Shaniqua. Raz? Really, Raz? All right. And as a handler, you also, basically as a final note, as a handler, again, make sure you have a way to get yourself and your fursuiter back to, not safety, but a place where you're in a safe zone, for example. So wherever you are, whether it be in a hotel, whether you're at a convention center, whether you're at the mall, whether you're at the park, you want to make sure as a handler, you yourself know how to get back home. If nobody else, not the fursuiter, not anyone else, you yourself know how to, you know, basically get back to the safe zone. Raz's safe zone is under the table, apparently, so he's fine himself there. We'll just let him take a nap there for a little bit. All right. So last part about when you're performing in fursuit is cooling down, because you know cooling down is very, very essential for fursuiters. When you're in a public space, again, make sure you have a designated area to de-suit and cool down, or take a break even, and that area should also probably have water. It's a very good idea, and your tote or whatever bag you use to carry your suit around. You also want to make sure that you have somewhere to store your suit safely as well, because we don't want to leave our precious suits lying around. These things cost money, and we all know that. Some of them ranging in the thousands, the 2000s, 3000s, 4s and up. So we want to make sure we have a way to store our suits safely, and again in an area that's concealed, or at least that's kind of protected in that sense. For conventions and hotels, you know, such as one that we're at right now, you always want to make sure that you know where the headless lounge is. And again, as I mentioned at the beginning, you want to make sure that you take plenty of breaks. Even if you don't feel like you need a break, if you're passing by the headless lounge, even perhaps just pop your head in there for 10 seconds, let that cool breeze blow into your head, and you know, get a nice second wind so that you can pop back out and you feel refreshed again. Make sure you have everything as well when you're cooling down. So when you take off your head, you want to make sure that, or take off your suit, you want to make sure that you haven't lost any of your tags, you haven't lost your badge, you haven't lost your cell phone, for example, your room keys. Basically, make sure that you have everything you set out with, so that you don't have to suddenly panic and run out into the pod space without your head on, and you're ruining the magic and some little 4-year-old sees you and be like, oh my god, someone killed him! Or something like that. So make sure you have everything when you're cooling down as well, so you basically prevent any sort of panic. And take your time to cool down. Last but not least, when you're cooling down, is take your time. There's absolutely no rush to take off a fursuit, as well as basically take off the fursuit and then get right back down to the convention. The convention's still going to be here. It's not going to run away. So take your time. Your health and your safety is more important than coming down to the convention. So make sure when you're taking off your fursuit head or taking off your suit, you're not just ripping it off and hulking it out like that. But make sure you take it off. Check for any sort of damages. That's actually very, very important. Is check for damages as well. Make sure that if you're able to disinfect and clean your suit. And then make sure you have a good cool down yourself, whether that be a shower, whether that be a refreshing drink. At that time, I don't care if you have a margarita or whatever it is, maybe. So make sure you have ample time. Exactly. Make sure you have ample time to cool down. So again, the convention will be here until Sunday at least. So you have more than enough time to enjoy yourself. Because you can't enjoy yourself if you're just rushing around everywhere. That's no way to enjoy a convention. You want to make sure you take your time and enjoy every single moment of it, and that includes cool down. So, That was actually perfectly half an hour for the first section, so now I have about 20 minutes for the next one before I wrap up. So for those of you that saw in the schedule, I forgot to say that in the beginning, but for those of you that saw at the beginning of the, or in the convo on the schedule, this panel was supposed to run until 3:30, but that was because this was supposed to be a dual panel with another panelist. However, he was not able to make it, so I'm running this panel myself, which is totally fine, but it just means the panel is going to be cut short at 3 o'clock so that we're not all sitting in here listening to me making face noises. So, sounds good to everyone? Yeah, exactly, and so you guys can have a little bit more time to drink, it's all good. Yeah, does anyone have any questions so far before I move on to the next part? Any questions about going out in fursuit? Yes, sir.
What's the best way to disinfect your suit?
The best way to disinfect your suit, I'm about to cover that right now, but I might as well say it. Usually people use either one of two things, or both have their pros and cons. The first thing that people use is any sort of Febreze antibacterial or the Walmart brand. I highly do not recommend the Walmart brand. The end back that they have at Walmart is frankly disgusting. Febreze antibacterial is kind of the standard that most people use as well. People are beginning to transition over to using just straight isopropyl rubbing alcohol, 70% volume. Half and half mixture, you don't want to use the full 70%. You want to make sure that you mix at least a little bit of just regular tap water in so that you're not bathing your suit in rubbing alcohol. Because for some suits and for some materials, it actually does damage the fabric. So you want to make sure that you do kind of balance out what you're using in your fursuit. 50% works as well. It depends on what you get. If you have 50% rubbing alcohol, you can use that as well. For people that have 70%, such as I do, you can choose to water it down, dilute it if you'd like. For me personally, I like using the full 70, but I don't bathe my fursuit in it. That's the important part, is a light spray is more than enough, and then just let it dry there. And you want to make sure that, especially when you're taking off the fursuit, you get the insides. The outside, where the fur is and all that fluffy stuff, it's optional in my opinion to spray that, but the inside is the most important part to spray. And then turn it inside out so it helps dry faster, exactly. So, with that being said, now we move on to fursuit maintenance. So what you do before and after, as well as yes, Rez. Yes, and we'll get into washing afterwards. So that's all covered in the next section. So, fursuit maintenance. Again, it also depends on the environment you're in, whether you're at a convention, whether you're at home, whether you're in a public place. So we'll start off with convention since we're at one. When we're at a convention, you want to make sure when you take off your fursuit, the first thing you want to be able to do with your fursuit is dry it out as fast as possible and clean it out as fast as possible. So as we just mentioned, you want to make sure that you have some sort of disinfectant such as Febreze antibacterial if you have, or you can use the rubbing alcohol sprays if you'd like as well, watered down or pure. It really depends on what you're feeling and what you want to use on your suit. Flipping your suit inside out is also a very good idea as well. And most people hang their suits, so they have a hanger. They either use one of the hotel hangers or they bring their own, and they use it to hang their suits up in the closet or somewhere else in the room. Please don't hang it on the fire sprinkler. I'll say that right now. I will personally deal with the person that decides to hang it on the fire sprinkler, because I had to deal with that incident at a convention. It was not pretty. It's at 4 a.m. in the morning. You can imagine what happens when someone puts a heavy fursuit on a fire sprinkler and yeah, exactly. It's not fun. So fans are also a very, very good investment whenever you have a fursuit. Either it can be, a simple $10 Honeywell circular fan, or you can use one of those box fans that you can buy at Walmart for $15 as well. You can even use those turbine fans, the ones that are like super high powered as well, those ones will dry your fursuit almost instantaneously as well. So as long as it's a fan that you can use to dry your fursuit, any fan will do. It's recommended to have 2 fans. This is what most fursuiters will tell you. One for your head, because the headpiece is pretty much the most prominent to dry first. I mean, that thing will get the sweatiest, unless you sweat elsewhere, which I'm not going to comment on. What? That was a perfectly innocent comment. What are you going to do? Are you going to handcuff me? Okay, no, I was joking, my body's not ready. Okay, so the second fan, not hand, one second hand. Sorry. Yeah, the second fan would be used for your bodysuit, which is again also the second dampest thing that you will have. Hands and feet, if you have extra fans or if you can shove everything onto one fan, you can also dry those out as well. But mainly your head and your body are the two biggest pieces that you want to dry first of your fursuit. The head, or the hands and the feet, if you're able to, then by all means do so as well. Alright, so there's a difference as well for fursuits in terms of drying as well and their airflow, so this is important to point out. This is more specifically towards the heads, however. So for a resin-based head, those of you that has resin-based head, does anyone in here have a resin-based head by any chance? So everyone here is foam-based, so I'll say it anyway. So for a resin-based head, a spray might not work exactly well because depending on how the head is built, it might not get into the areas, it might not actually cover the entire area. So just as a kind of a key point for those that will be getting resin-based heads or do have a resin-based head, if you have a resin-based head, mix a little bit of water with the alcohol, don't use the full thing, and use it as a wipe. Don't spray it down, it's much easier and much more thorough if you spray it onto a cloth. It can be a microfiber cloth, can be just a paper towel, and you wipe the inside of the head with your hand. For foam-based heads, the spray works as well. If you've got a balaclava inside your head, you can spray it as well. You can take that cloth and you can kind of dampen the balaclava and then dry it off with the fan. Basically, as long as you get that disinfectant into the head where your face makes contact with it, that's the best. That's the priority, basically. Teddy bear spray cleaner works as well. Some people do use teddy bear because it's a little bit more gentle on the fursuit fabric, as well as because teddy bear cleaners were made for fur. Rubbing alcohol is rubbing alcohol, but the teddy bear cleaner is a little more gentle with fursuits, and you'll be able to use it for your head as well as outside of the suit as well, and it keeps your suit also smelling fresh, like a freshly washed teddy bear. So that's also another alternative for those that don't want to use some sort of antibacterial. Very, very big caution for those that have airbrushed marks on their heads or on their bodysuits is be careful when you're spraying your alcoholic solution, your disinfectant on those parts, because it may cause a reaction and cause that whatever ink or airbrush it is to run. So if you have any questions about that, the best thing to do is to ask your fursuit maker about how to clean your head, especially for, again, those with airbrushed markings. You want to make sure that you don't accidentally go over them and perhaps reactivate the paint that's on there. Alright, so brushing up the suits as well. So most of us fursuiters here, we have a brush, we own a brush, we brush out our suits to make them nice and fluffy and so that we all look good when we're out and about at conventions. So when you're at a convention, when you're at home, when you're basically taking care of your suit, brushing it out is a really, really good way to not only keep your suit looking nice and nice and fluffy and all that, but it's also good for getting tangles and all the unwanted stuff out of your suit. A lot of times you might find you're brushing your suit and you notice that, oh, there's this stain or there's this stuff that's hidden underneath the fur, a tuft of fur. You don't know where it came from. Hopefully none of you guys encounter that at IFC, but basically it's a good way to ensure that not only your suit looks good, but that there's nothing in it and it's not being matted and tangled up. And it also helps extend the longevity of your suit. We all spend, again, a lot of money on our fursuits, and we want to make sure that they stay around for as long as possible. So brushing it will ensure that your fursuit looks new and it doesn't get ripped and matted up and has that kind of old suit look, and that we stay looking good for as long as we can. Alright. Type of brush, basically, it's you can use any sort of slicker brush. Slicker brush is what I prefer for my suit. It depends on the fur that you have. For people that have short fur, short pow fur on their suits, you can use a slicker brush, you can use a grooming brush. For long pile, slicker brush that's with soft bristles is recommended because you don't want to use the sharp metal bristles that some straight-edged or straight-line grooming brushes have, as that can possibly rip out the fur if you do it a little too hard. So the easiest and the safest solution to go is the soft bristle slicker brush. Yes?
Use it backwards.
Yes, and do it backwards as well.
If you use the metal one, use the metal one backwards.
Yes, use it backwards. So another important tip, kind of like a tip and trick basically when you're brushing your suit, is you don't want to brush it you don't want to stick the brush down deep in your suit and yank all the fur out, because that pretty much will yank all the fur out if you're not being careful. The suits, especially those that have long pile fur or medium pile furs, they don't need a lot to be brushed out. You don't have to use a lot of force to brush them out. Just a light, gentle scrubbing, kind of like if you're scratching, you know, if you're kind of like scratching a cat or a pet or anything like that. It's the same thing with the brushes, just nice and gentle strokes. You can be, you know, quick with them if you'd like, but you just don't want to apply a lot of force, especially, as Fu Manchu there mentioned, if you have the metal bristles on your brush, you want to make sure you're not digging it like perpendicular into the suit and ripping your fur out. You want to make sure you angle it backwards so that the bristles are not digging into the fabric and they're kind of just tracing along, gently brushing out the fur, as that will also get the tangles out as well, but you won't be hurting the fur at the same time. So that covered conventions. Now we're going to move just a little bit into public spaces as an extension of that. If you were performing in your fursuit in a public space, you want to make sure that when you're there, you want to avoid greasy areas or muddy areas, and basically anywhere that could potentially cause some sort of stain or damage to your fursuit. This is especially deceiving when you're on an escalator or an elevator, because those things do have some grease on them, especially escalators. I found this out the hard way many times. So make sure you be careful. You be careful when you're around machinery such as elevators and escalators. If you don't have to touch the doors, or if you don't have to touch the panels or the sides or anything like that, it's recommended not to, because you know sometimes they do apply greases and whatnot, or some sort of cleaner, and it will rub off onto your suit, especially if you have a light colored suit. And public spaces, it's the same thing. If you don't have a hotel room, at least have a designated area where you can take off your suit, clean it out as fast as possible, and either hang it or lay it out somewhere where it can dry. Even if you don't have a fan, as long as you pull your suit inside out and let it, say, drape over a chair or whatnot, or over a table, it's better than nothing, basically. So now we're going to get to washing fursuits. Very, very simple, but just a few guidelines to remember for washing fursuits. Turning your fursuit inside out is the best way to go when you're washing a fursuit, because again, the inside is what you want to get washed. The fur on the outside, it's not too pertinent to get washed, but you know it'll still be washed when you wash it as well. But turning your fursuit inside out is more important so that you can get all the icky stuff, you know, from the inside of the suit taken care of. When you're washing your fursuits, most recommended way in terms of water to wash your fursuit is use cold water. Please do not ever use warm or hot water. Cold water is the safest way to go. Cold or hot, or warm or hot water is basically, it's like treating your fur and heat will not react well. Fur and heat does not react well, it's just subjective. So cold water is the safest way to go for most fursuits. In terms of the detergent that you use, the general consensus for detergent is woolite. Woolite is the softest to use on your fursuit. It'll treat the fabric the most gently. You can either use the regular woolite, you can use baby woolite, you can use the woolite for dark colors. Basically, any woolite will work as long as you know you're not. Well, as long as your suit allows it. Most fursuits, most fabrics do allow it. Again, if you're unsure about it, the best thing to do is ask your fursuit maker. So. Fabric softener isn't really needed. If you'd like to add it in for the scent, it's up to you, but it really isn't needed because fur is already soft enough. And I mean, unless you have a very matted or old fursuit, it's not going to make too much of a difference, so a regular wash will be more than enough. This is the absolute rule for people that wash fursuits. Do not ever put it in a dryer. Fursuits in dryer, you might as well just toss it in the garbage right away, because the fur in dry, damp fur or any sort of fur in a dryer, you will basically wreck the fur. Even if it's a quick dry, it will make the fur basically all frazzled, and it's just, it's a shame to see. Basically, that's the only way I can describe it. You'll look at it and you'll basically just like, yeah, I'm not even gonna concede that thought. It's already depressing. So no fursuits in the dryer. Hang dry, use the fans as well. It's the same way as you would do at a convention. If you're able to even if you have a laundry machine that has a spin cycle, a drain and rinse cycle, that's also a good way to go as well if you need to dry your fursuit a little bit more. Speaking of machines, I forgot to go over this point. You want to make sure that you use front loader machines if possible. Top loaders, if they have an agitator, you'd have to check with your machine. If they have an agitator, it's not really recommended. And also, if you're putting your fursuit in a machine wash, if you have one of those bags that you use for, what is it? Like
Lingerie.
Yeah, for lingerie, exactly, for lingerie. If you have one of those lingerie bags, paws and claws, anything that has paws and claws, feet paws, hand paws, and claws, anything fragile or that you don't want to be, smacked around the machine, put it in a lingerie bag and then put it in the machine as well. And yeah, brush it while it dries as well. Turn it inside out. Well, it already will be inside out. If you'd like to turn it back outside in so that the fur is on the outside, you can do that. And it's always best to brush it while it's drying out as well, as that will retain the kind of shape and texture of the fur a little bit better. So it's basically better to do when it's drying out rather than when it is dry. It'll still have somewhat of the same effect, but it'll retain its kind of lush texture if you brush it all while it is drying. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So brushing, basically back brushing works as well if you want to dry it out just a little bit better. Some people back brush and then they brush it back down again to kind of do double duty. I actually do that myself. So you can back brush to let it dry a little bit and then just a few moments later, brush it back down. You can repeat back and forth and your fur will come out nice and lush, basically. So, storing your fursuits, basically don't store your fursuits in any area that's exposed to light or heat. Don't expose it to light because fursuits do react with UV light and it will fade in terms of its color, just like any clothing if you leave it in sunlight. So please don't leave it in any sort of light. Same thing with heat, it's the same situation with dryers. If you leave it in heat, there's always that possibility that the fur will start to frazzle and, sometimes it's unrepairable, sometimes it is, but we'd rather not take the risk, seeing as how much we spend on our fursuits. The most optimal place to store a fursuit would be in your tote and in the closet or in a dark place again. It depends on basically what you have. If you have an action packer, for example, you can store it in the action packer and you can leave it in your closet, you can leave it somewhere in your room that's not exposed to light or heat. But basically, as long as you're able to store it in a cool and dark place, your fursuit will be most safe in that. Dryer sheets are optional for those of you that have dryer sheets such as Bounce or Downy or whatever dryer sheets you might have. You can stick it in your fursuit head, you can stick it in the bin that you keep your fursuit in. It'll keep the fursuit smelling extra nice. For myself, I use kind of like a Febreze, those sensational lavender, whatever, put you to sleep bounce sheets. So I put that inside my fursuit head. So whenever I put on my head, it's always this pleasant aroma rather than, smelly, disinfectant, Febreze, antibacterial, whatever. So those are optional. And another optional thing that some people use, they have actual mannequin heads or busts, so they have somewhere to put their head on and have it just sitting out there rather than leaving it in a bin. And this is pretty much optional as well because you could either leave it in a bin and it'll stay like that, or you can display it on a mannequin. So you can look at it when you're at home, you can show it off to family and friends when they're at home, or you just have a place to put your fursuit head without squashing it. Alright, so the two most common things you'll find to store fursuits in are action packer totes, or basically just any like Rubbermaid or Sterlite totes that you can find at Walmart. Those are the most common things that people put their fursuits in. Some people also use duffel bags or vacuum bags. Those two also work for fursuits that are a little smaller in size and that can fit into those bags. So basically, you want to be able to know what your fursuit can take. If your fursuit can squish a little bit and you don't really care about it, hopefully you do at least care about it, then they can go in a vacuum bag or preferably duffel bag. But if you have a head that has a few intricate details, such as Fu Manchu over there, if you look, he's got horns, he's got whiskers, he's got adornments, he's got basically a lot of things that do not want to be squished in any way or form. So something like that you need a big tote for, and you have to be a little bit more careful packing that. On planes, you can take it as your own carry-on, exactly, or your personal item. So some fursuiters do that as well, and if you don't mind the kind of like double glances you'll get from other travelers, then exactly, you're used to it by now.
I use a big drawstring laundry bag.
Exactly, a big drawstring laundry bag. Exactly, and the best part about it is that it won't squish the head in as well. Those things kind of bend and conform to your head shape. So drawstring laundry bags work very well as well. So on the note of traveling, when you're traveling with your fursuits, again, if you keep them in your tote or in your bag, or your tote or in your bag, those are the safest places to keep them in when you are traveling. You don't want to like leave it lying around, you know, not protected by a tote or a bag, just in case anything happens to them. So we'll start with basically driving first. As long as you're a good driver, hopefully you are, you keep it in your tote or in your bag, they're totally fine like that. Try not to keep it in the back seat if there's going to be a lot of sunlight in the back seat, for example, because there's going to be a lot of sunlight, there's going to be a lot of heat. You don't want to expose your fursuit to any of that. Most people put their fursuits in the trunk, in their tote or bag, and that's the safest way to do it. When you're flying, however, because many of us have to fly to these conventions with our fursuits, basically make sure your luggage does not like fold easily. You don't have to have a hard shell case necessarily. Some people buy the hard shell case for extra protection, but as long as the corners and the edges of your fursuit case do not easily bend or break in, you can pack your fursuits in those as well. Some people, again, prefer to take their head as their personal item onto the plane, and they pack their bodysuit and everything else in their checked-in luggage. So it basically depends on what your flavor is. Yeah, carry-on, for example, some people like to do it as a carry-on. I usually just do it as a full checked-in luggage because I frankly have too much stuff in my carry-on anyways. So I do it. So I put it in my checked-in luggage, and as long as you are careful with your fursuit and you know how to pack it, basically you are at liberty to make it work as you see fit. But basically it's recommended as long as you have something good, whether it's a hard shell case, a soft shell case, an action packer to pack your fursuit in, just be careful and pack it the way you want. A TSA lock is optional when you're traveling by air. It's not really needed because, I mean, frankly, they'll break it open anyways if they want to. So it's not really an investment I'd say is worthwhile. But if you'd like that extra insurance, then you can put a TSA lock on it as well. Zip ties in your suitcase are also very handy as well, just to make sure that nothing is bulging or breaking out. And at the same time, if you put your fursuit in one of those drawstring laundry bags and you put it in your checked-in luggage, you want to make sure that nothing breaks out, and you can use zip ties to ensure that as well. This is something that I've heard some fursuiters do, and I used to do this as well until I realized it wasn't really too effective. But you can also put a printout of your costume in the carry-on or the checked-in luggage, whatever it may be. So in the case that your checked-in luggage is open for whatever reason, whoever is checking it can see this notice that says this is a mascot costume, please be careful with it whatsoever, and yada yada yada. So again, I've tried this myself a few times over the past couple of years, and it's not particularly effective from what I've noticed, but again, if you'd like that extra insurance, it doesn't help.
Yeah, I actually told them at the front, when I actually flew with it to Connecticut, to for Apocalypse, I told them it was a mascot suit. And they still went through the bag, but it was actually extra insurance because they're like, oh, it's only a mascot costume. So they didn't freak out as much when they opened the box.
Exactly. So basically,
so it's the same difference.
I mean, the general rule when you're traveling, especially by air, and you're concerned about your fursuit, is you're better being safe than better being sorry. You know, whatever you can do to ensure that your suit is safe and secure, because that's the biggest priority for us. To ensure that your suit is safe and secure, you can put the TSA lock on it. You can put the zip ties in your suitcase to make sure it's not breaking out or anything is loose. You can put that printout of your costume as well as a description of what it is. But it's entirely up to your discretion and how you like to treat your fursuit.
And Ryan, you had a question.
Question over here.
Yeah, that's actually very iffy. So.
Yeah.
I know someone who they took it out of his luggage and ripped the head apart to examine the electronics. Had that paper here explaining it.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why, again, for a lot of people, they do choose to take their head as a carry-on or personal item because they don't run that risk of having some, TSA guy ripping the head apart just to look for, like a fan, for example. Like even if they see a fan in there, they'll be like, oh, this is an electronic, we must rip this apart, and buy fursuit head that costs, $1,000+.
Yep.
So again, if you're feeling a little bit more hesitant about your fursuit head, Carrying it on with the plane with you is ideal as well. Any other sensitive items such as a fursuit fan, fursuit props. You know, for some people, paws and feet, if you want to take those on with you on the plane and not in the checked-in luggage, it's entirely up to you and your discretion about how you feel about your fursuit. What's up?
Never ever flown. If TSA does tear that up, aren't they financially responsible?
They will not. This is basically the TSA's way of saying this is for your safety and the safety of everyone else. Therefore, we have the right to inspect everything if we feel that blah blah blah. And it's written in basically the TSA rules. They will not recompensate you for it. So that's why there's been a lot of horror stories with flying in fursuits. Fursuits that have gone missing, fursuits that have been damaged by TSA. Basically, a lot of things have happened with furs and flying. So again, the best that we can do as just regular commuters is we can just take as many precautions as we can when we're flying with fursuits. We can take our heads onto the plane as well as any other sensitive items. We can put them all in bags so that they don't get stained, they don't get rubbed, they don't get ruffled up in the wrong ways. Exactly. You can mail your suit. Some people choose to mail their suit as well.
Let's be careful on the mailing process and get that wrong, and you have no idea what.
Basically, there's many ways that you can handle moving around your fursuit, so you make sure that your fursuit is set up. All right, so, or you can just drive. Exactly. Some of us can be idiots like I am and drive 11 hours here. So.
Woo, I did that.
Yeah, so we can also do that as well. It basically depends on what you'd like to do with your fursuit as a convoy. So the last category that I have to go through, because we're already kind of going past an hour, but we do have until 3:30. The last category I want to go through is repairs, because there may be that one day where we noticed, oh my gosh, my fursuit has a rip in it. What do I do? The world's going to end. Just calm down and remember that a fursuit is simply a piece of arts and crafts, a very elaborate piece of arts and crafts, but that means at the same time we can repair it if it fixes. So for fursuit repairs, when you get out of fursuit, as I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure that you take time to check your suit, even if it's very quickly, to see if anything's amiss. Whether you've got, say, a rip in one of the seams, whether or not, say, if you have ears that are static, whether your ears are bent the wrong way. Basically, check your fursuit to see if anything's gone amiss, and it's a good habit to get into because, again, we want to keep our fursuits looking good and, basically presentable. In the event you do need to make a repair on your fursuit, make sure you have a repair kit with you. It doesn't need to be an entire workshop to build a fursuit, but even a small bag that contains sewing needles, your basic sewing kit, needle, thread, even some fur scraps if you have fur scraps that you need. Calling me. Anyways, I don't know. Who's giving my number? Are you giving my number out to people? Darn it, Raz, I told you I stopped being in that business. Okay, anyways.
Never out.
Never out. I didn't choose that life chose me. Alright, anyways, again, fursuit, basically a fursuit repair kit, make sure it has all your essentials, needle, thread, so a few scraps if you need, maybe even a glue gun and some glue sticks if you need to, or epoxy or something like that. Whatever you think your suit needs in case of any emergency fix. Basically, it's a good idea to bring it along with you. If you don't happen to have any sort of repair kit, it's always good to make a friend that knows how to repair fursuits. So you don't really need to, buy them a drink and schmooze up to them and say, "Psst, how would you like to fix my fursuit for me?" You don't really need to do that unless you'd like to. But if you have a friend that knows how to work a needle and thread, that's also, useful as well. Raz,
She's not a Congo. I didn't